at the time that I started this project, I still had voicemails that I had never listened to because there's so many of them. And I didn't know what I wanted to make with it. There were all of these different tones in her voice that I needed to go through. And there was so much of the hijya, hijya, hijya going on. And all of them said something different to me. And as a barely related note, every time that I hear the beep of a phone now anywhere, I feel like they're playing my film. My name is Hae Ji. I'm a Korean Brazilian American filmmaker based in Los Angeles. This film is an ode to my grandmother, who I call Halmoni in Korean. And this film explores my journey as a caretaker for her during the years in which she was developing Alzheimer's, as well as the anxiety and the loneliness that she felt without a proper support system for either of us.
Thank you for sharing with us. I love the backdrop.
Thank you.
It's great.
It's so much pottery that I've made that it's getting cluttered.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never spun a pottery wheel, so
I would highly recommend it.
yeah, very relaxing, I'm sure.
It's very grounding. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be completely present because everything that you do is reflected on the piece right before you.
Mhm.
So, yeah. And I mean,
That's very
it's touching elements, right? So
Mhm.
it's touching the clay, it's water, then it goes into fire. So you see everything. I found it very poetic the first time that I did it, because I thought that you either needed to be so much more gentle with it or so much rougher with it. But it's actually not so much about pushing, it's about being firm with it. It's this balance that I think also is very reflected in people's constant search for boundaries. It's really interesting.
It's kind of like life itself. You've got
It
to
is.
find that balance
It's a
and everything.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that actually just leads me to like one of the questions I had is is there a connection in your mind to like art and healing and having a connection to just your life in general, whether it's producing clay or pottery or, you know, filmmaking, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that art is a way to transform energy. So there's all of this energy that I constantly have inside me. So if I leave it inside, it can transform into restlessness, into sometimes depression, sometimes extreme joy. But there's something about putting that into art that is healing because sometimes you need a little bit of a buffer
Hmm.
from you and what you're trying to express. Sometimes you need a bridge to it, and sometimes you don't really know how to get there. Um, and there are times when we can see it as a distraction, but I don't think that it's necessarily a distraction in a negative way. I think it's a lens through which we can interpret something that we're going through so that we can understand it a little bit better with tools that we didn't have before.
Oh, that's great. Uh, that's wonderful. And I feel like you do that so beautifully in sorry I missed your call. With the tools that you had available to you, like the voicemails and the photos and everything. Um, so do you want to just go through with me just right at the beginning?
Yeah.
하지야, 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 할머니야. 할머니가 보고 싶어서 전화했는데.
connected to an automatic voice message system.
I want to talk a little bit about, for everybody who doesn't already know the film,
Yeah.
the voicemails that were used were all real voicemails that were left by my grandmother over a number of years. That started from before she had Alzheimer's, through the time in which she was developing it and when she was well in it. So I had hundreds of voicemails from her. And at the time that I started this project, I still had voicemails that I had never listened to because there's so many of them. And I didn't know what I wanted to make with it. So by the time that I started this, there were all of these different tones in her voice that I needed to go through. And there was so much of the hijah, hijah, hijah going on. And all of them said something different to me. So as similar as these might sound to somebody who's listening to it for the first time, they sound so different to me, each one. And as a barely related note, every time that I hear the beep of a phone now anywhere, I feel like they're playing my film. I also want to talk about how the turning of the character who represents me is really this constant inner struggle to want to meet my grandmother, Harmony, as she's going through this journey and she's feeling increasingly lost and she's feeling lonely. And I want to be there for her, but I can't. And there are times when I'm so eager to do it, I can't do it. And there are times when I'm apprehensive to do it and I stop myself. When I was a caretaker, it was constantly this battle of wanting to do something that I couldn't do at times, that I didn't have the capacity for. And while we're here on this frame, when the voicemail ends, we see this leaf. Yes, this leaf. And it's a very specific that I chose this one because it's from a hibiscus flower. The hibiscus is very interesting because my family is from Korea, but also spent many decades in Brazil because of my grandparents. And there's hibiscus that is the national flower of Korea, but there's also hibiscus that is native to Brazil, which is so odd. They're very different parts of the world, but felt like a very nice coincidence to have. And my grandmother was very much a green thumb and was always pointing out plants and flowers. And the way in which she took care of plants was very representative of the way that she loved, which was getting to know the needs of each specific person and doing it the way that they needed it to, and however much sun they needed, however much water, but being always so attentive to it.
That's great. It's a great memory to have and a great representation of who she was.
할머니가 많이 전화해도 없더라. 할머니가 아까도 전화하고 두 번이나 전화했는데 안 받아서 또 했어.
Because this is a mixed media animation, there were certain things that I needed to decide how I wanted to actually portray them. So there are certain things that I took photos of, like this aisle of one supermarket and the display of fruits from another supermarket. And sometimes I really try to use real photos of objects or places when I wanted it to register a lot more quickly by the audience. I didn't want people to spend a lot of time figuring out, oh, where is she? What am I interpreting here? What should I be paying attention to? I really wanted the attention to go to the animation and something that they would spend a little more time interpreting because it's something new to them. So here too, we see that she's looking around her and she's looking to see if anybody's judging her, but really the only person who's judging her the most is herself. And that was my experience a lot of the time as a caretaker, that a lot of times I did feel judged by family members, by other people around me, and sure, that did happen at times, but really a majority of the time it was really the demand that I put on myself to be a certain version of a caretaker that I wanted to be, that I felt I was failing to show up as.
Yeah, sometimes those expectations we have of ourselves or as um, aren't the same that others have, and
Mhm.
I don't think um, yeah, many people recognize that.
어젯밤에 너 왔어? 오늘 온다더니 왔네? 안 왔네? 답답해 죽겠어, 할머니.
The thing about being a caretaker for somebody who took care of you for a long period of your life is that dynamic doesn't change from one day to another. So as much as I was a caretaker for my grandmother, it's so hardwired in her to be a caretaker as well.
Mm.
So as much as I show up with groceries and I try to be that person, she's comforting me in this. And I think that a lot of people of Asian descent will recognize the plate of fruit as something that is a symbol of love and of dedication. And that is something that my grandparents always did. They peeled fruit for me. And I was the one who was starting to do that for them. But even as that started to change and I started to become the person who was providing, my grandma still wanted to do things for me. She still wanted to give me a kind word. She still wanted to cook, even though she couldn't cook anymore. She couldn't taste things. She was leaving food out, and things were rotting. She didn't really know how to tell apart different ingredients at times, but she wanted to be that person. And there was a difficulty in figuring out where the line was a lot of times. And I want to be respectful of the fact that she had an entire life. She's somebody who I respected very much and admired, and she'd led a huge family and businesses. And I couldn't just take that all away from her all of a sudden when Alzheimer's is something that also doesn't happen suddenly. And it's something that some days she's a lot more like herself, the way that I remember her, and some days she's very much not. And I didn't want to take that agency away from her. I wanted to allow her to feel like herself as much as possible for as long as possible. I also mentioned that this frame is another one in the mixed media that I use something different. I cut out paper and hand drew the different characteristics of her face, and I hand stitched the red thread and manually moved it
Oh
over a
wow.
green screen.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's. I was wondering how you achieved that, whether if it was just digital textures or that's
Mhm.
cool you did that
It was all
all by hand.
mixed. I learned how
Yeah.
to use After Effects for this. I had never done animation before this, so for me it was a
Oh,
lot of
really?
experimentation. Yeah, this was my
Yeah.
first animation ever. To
Oh,
the
that's
point that
great.
thank you. Yeah, I was like, oh, I always wanted to make an animation, And then I got the opportunity to make it. And I was like, oh God, now I have to make it.
답답해 죽겠어 할머니. 혜지야, 잘했어? 혼자 있지? 혼자 있지? 시어머니 여기 와서 할머니하고 자.
The caretaking experience for me was extremely lonely. And that's something that, as I speak to other caretakers, especially ones who ended up in this position sooner than they had planned for, or really from circumstances that were unpredictable, it is a huge theme that we felt lonely, that we felt invisible. And there are many times when I felt that I needed so much help, and I felt it was so visible that I needed help, and sometimes I would be so vocal about it. And all of these people in my life were going on with their lives. And it didn't feel harmless. It did feel like reaching out for help with the few resources that I had, whether it was limited time or limited energy, mental bandwidth, and feeling out of sorts all the time, and feeling like no matter how much I was trying to keep things together for somebody else, as she was losing parts of herself, I was also losing parts of myself in that process. And no matter how much I tried, I wasn't able to keep everything intact.
혜지야. 할머니야. 뭐 하는데 그렇게 바빠? 왜 전화도 안 하고 할머니 찾지도 않고 오지도 않고 그래? 나 보고 싶어 죽겠는데.
When I created this scene, I very intentionally used a photo of myself as a baby, because this scene is really about how the roles are changing, going back to that theme, of how she was somebody who took care of me and now I'm taking care of her. And when I was a caretaker for my grandparents, because they both had Alzheimer's at the same time in the same household, it really made me question whether I wanted kids. And it made me question whether I was fit to be a caretaker in that capacity, whether I could show up emotionally. And I read a book on shame from Brene Brown. And it did have a section in which she talked about caregivers and about how it was different from raising a child. Because when you're taking care of somebody who you saw as somebody who you respected, or in one form, and you saw them really falling apart, it comes with so many layers of shame. It comes with so many layers of sadness that, for example, with a child, you might experience something like first steps or first words, but with somebody who's a grandparent who has Alzheimer's, they're forgetting people in their lives who they love. They're forgetting how to tell a story that they've told 1,000 times. So it's different, I imagine, and from what I hear and what I read. But those are thoughts that did come to mind quite a bit. And it did feel at times that I was a parent for this person, and feeling like I never signed up for this role, and now I needed to step up to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're kind of forced into it. And I think that that comparison is often made where it's, caregiving an elder is a lot like a newborn. And it's um, I think you're right in recognizing that that elder, they unfortunately are getting worse. But
Mhm.
like I have a 14-month-old right now, and every day she's learning something. You know, it's like improving. So you're like looking forward to the next day. And I think as a caretaker, you're almost anxious about the next day.
Yeah.
보고 싶어 죽겠는데. 야, 어딨니 너? 어디 갔어? 여행 가기 전에 꼭 들려야 돼. 나 피면도 해주고 전화값이 나왔어. 피면도 해주고 할머니가 얘기할 게 있어서. 응? 야, 아직 안 가지? 할머니 벌써 보고 싶으냐 어떡하니?
Oi, Regi, aqui é o tio. Só tava wondering porque a harmonia não tá pedindo telefone.
Going back to the people who are leaving, I was a caretaker when I was in my early and mid 20s until I was maybe 26 or so, 26, 27. And during that time, I wanted to travel. I wanted to put a lot of time and energy into my career. I wanted to spend time with my friends and spend time with my boyfriend and do all of these different things that when you think of being in your 20s, you want to do. And there were times when my friends would ask if I wanted to go somewhere or if I wanted to travel somewhere with them. And many times I couldn't because I knew that there were people who depended on me being there that week. And when I wasn't at work and if I wasn't with my grandparents, I was exhausted because I didn't really have time for myself. And even now that I'm 31 and I'm years outside of this experience, I still feel that I've lived through different stages of life that other people my age have not. And in that way, there is a certain disconnect at times. And now I'm starting to relate that a little bit more to people who are a little bit older than me who might be starting that journey with their own parents or with their grandparents. But for a long time, the isolation wasn't just physical. It wasn't just feeling like nobody could understand specifically what it was like to be a caretaker, but it was also that I just couldn't talk to people about how I felt that I was missing out on my own life. And there was so much shame around that. And there's so much guilt around feeling like I was speaking about this responsibility as a sacrifice and making a sacrifice feel like a burden when I also realized what an honor it was to be able to take care of somebody I loved and somebody who was so present in my life, so formative to who I was, to who I am, and to really be able to exercise love in that way. So there's no perfect answer to feeling that way, but it is very complicated and very layered. And I wish that I had known other caretakers at the time who I could talk to about how we felt all those things at the same time, which now I have people to turn to and talk to about this, which is not, yes, this, but that. It is this and that at the same time.
Mm. And you have that experience to kind of provide that support system for the caretakers that are just starting their journey. And it almost like gets back to what you were talking about with the pottery is you have to kind of see what's in front of you to know what to do and how to react and how to form the clay and all that.
Yeah. Another thing with pottery too is we learn to get it wrong fast and a lot, because when you do, you know how to do it better next time. And that's something that I really hope to pass on. And part of the reason that I made this film is that I want somebody else to have a better experience than I did. And I want people to be having conversations about what caretaking looks like before they are in a state of crisis, before they are feeling the way that I felt at the time. And they're talking to people around them about, hey, when I am older, I want to be cared for in this way. Or, hey, when you are in a certain situation, whether you're in an accident, whether somebody's depressed, or whether you know somebody who has an addiction or it's Alzheimer's, right? What is that going to look like? And who's going to be around me? And how am I going to have an outlet for this?
Yeah, it's all very important.
Yeah. Conversations we need to be having.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
아빠 보고 싶으니 어떡하니?
Oi, Regi, aqui é o tio. Só tava wondering porque a harmonia não tá pedindo pra falar.
여보세요. 할머니요. 전화 좀 해줘. 혜지야, 어떻게 됐니, 할머니? 입원이 됐니? 할머니 친구한테 전화 좀 해. 야, 할머니야. 오늘 만에 전화했다는데 내가 못 받았어. 할머니가 아빠가 신경 썼지. 연어하고 밥하고 맛.
As much as I did say that a majority of the pressure came from myself, there was always pressure from outside. There were so many people who had an opinion on what I could be doing, what I could be doing better, what I didn't do, even if they didn't know what I was or wasn't doing, what kind of care she should be getting, right? And I know that it all came from a place of love. They wanted her to have the best because it is what she deserved. But it also came from a place of helplessness, I think, for a lot of them, because a lot of them weren't here. Most of them were not here, or they didn't have the capacity to do more, and they knew that I was there. So they hoped that somebody who was showing up could do these things. And I think there are a lot of wishes, a lot of, I wish I could take her to lunch. I wish that she felt like she had company today. There are a lot of wishes. But I think that when somebody's not in a position to really consider what goes into making those wishes come to reality, and don't consider really how it could affect the person who is putting that into effect, and how they are taking in really oftentimes unsolicited opinions and advice, it can be a weight and can be an obstacle to providing better care, because it is stripping away the little energy that a person may have. So I do think that we could afford to have better conversations with the people who are caretakers. It's not a matter of not having an opinion. It's not a matter of not caring. It's a matter of maybe going to a person and really seeing what is this costing you as a human being to be here, not as somebody who's just providing a service.
Yeah. And people think of caretakers as people providing a service. And honestly, like if a family member or not, like I have family members that are caring for their grandmother with Alzheimer's right now, and they're just expected to be there. And if
Yeah.
something goes wrong, it's their fault, and you know, it's just,
Yes.
it's very hard.
Being treated as an endless well without ever being asked what it is that I need to do better in this position,
Mhm,
but also being held accountable for anything that may be considered a mistake or anything that may have gone wrong,
mhm,
whether it's within my control or not. But so much of this experience had to come with me coming around to having more empathy for people who I held at times so much resentment for.
mhm,
Because yes, there is that helplessness of not being able to be there for your loved one yourself. There's also guilt in that.
mhm,
There's guilt on my end as somebody who was doing my best and it still couldn't provide what I felt was the best. And
mhm,
there is guilt in being somewhere else and not being the one doing that. To the point that after I was a caretaker for my grandmother, she went on to live with my mother, who also worked on the film as an additional artist.
mhm. Very
Um,
cool.
and it was to the point in which I think my grandparents were in a place in which they could really have used more professional help.
Mhm,
But my mother did feel that as a daughter, it was her duty to be the one to take care of them.
mhm,
Um, I don't always feel that intentions are enough to make up for what a person truly needs.
mhm,
Um, and I think that we need to be asking ourselves if we're really capable of providing what that person requires. Because for a long time, I knew that I couldn't, but my family didn't have the means to provide something different, a different kind of
right,
care.
right.
Um, it was also our first time really taking care of somebody in this way. We didn't know what steps to take.
Mhm,
We weren't educating this capacity. I think everybody had so many worries at the time in their own
mhm,
circumstances that we didn't feel that we could even begin to look for information. We didn't know where to turn to, who to talk
mhm.
to. Um, so communication, it's a
Yeah.
big one.
하고 맛있게 해주고 할머니가 많이 먹었대. 고마워. 밖에서 그렇게 먼 데까지 와서 얼른 해주고 가서. 사랑해. 네가 그렇게 해주지 누가 그렇게 해주냐 할머니한테. 고마워. 오늘은 덜 아팠어 혜주야. 혜주야 잘했어.
The flowers that we see around her in this garden, they are inspired by coloring books that my grandma colored before she started showing signs of Alzheimer's and after. The ones that she did before were very meticulously colored. They were all within lines for the most part. They had all of these different details and layers of colors. And it's so beautiful to see art through the eyes of somebody you love, because you see how they see the world, you know. And as somebody who always loved plants, my grandma was somebody who was seeing them in a way that I had never seen them. I saw that she saw purples and yellows in places where I just saw orange. And it's really, art is a language. And the reason that I created this is a mixed media um, animation was because I knew that all of these different art forms said something different with their textures, with um, color. Because even sometimes in different mediums, you're not able to achieve certain colors. And when she started showing more signs of Alzheimer's, and as it progressed, you start seeing, for example, in this frame, some of the more sketch-like traces, and about how you can start to see how color starts to lean a little bit more on one side and on the other. They're a little bit more divided or polarized. And it's very interesting that somebody told me about how people with different conditions were drawing clocks, and how somebody who was neurotypical and their executive functions were as you would expect them to be, just looked like a regular clock. All the numbers were where they were supposed to be, and somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, they started to bunch up numbers on one side. And that's very much what I started to see in her work. We stopped seeing layers of colors. We started seeing that she had loss of, you know, spatial awareness as well. She didn't have as much control over her hands or how she was utilizing her body, aside from how she was processing things mentally. And to see that visually and not just experience it in my social interactions with her was sobering and very informative to me, because at times when there were people around me who were in denial about the state that she was in and were saying she seems perfectly normal and she sounds lucid, she's nothing is happening, she's just aging and forgetting things here and there, whereas I knew that she was asking me whose daughter I was. And I felt, how is it that, how can I communicate the differences and the progression of this? And meanwhile, I was looking at these coloring books, and there was proof there all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, just noticing those little things.
Mhm.
That's
And
wild.
even you mentioned, you were asking me about the role of art in healing. And part of the role of art in healing is it being able to communicate visually, or sometimes not visually, right? Because art can be in so many forms, but being able to communicate in different forms what you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and that's you do it really well in the film with the sound design. Is it's it makes you anxious when you're feeling anxious, and like you have these moments where you're almost trapped, and it's and yeah, the mixed
yeah.
media does a great job of representing how all those different things can make you either brighten your day or make you feel a certain way. So
Yeah. My composer, Wanji Lee, she's so talented, and I threw so many different emotions at her, and I said, I know these seem contradictory, but they need to go together. And
mm,
she nailed it so well, and we went back and forth a little bit.
mm,
um and then this is actually the version before the final one, because the final one was so beautiful and so polished, um that I had to go back one, because I didn't want it to be that polished,
yeah.
because it's a rough experience.
Hmm.
And going back to the animation right before the scene of all the scratches and all of the mouths, I didn't want it to look perfect. I wanted it to look messy. Because it was a messy experience. I was figuring it out in the moment. So it was really about, it's not so much about how do I make this the best quality of animation for it to look gorgeous. It was really about how do I communicate the emotional reality of this.
글쎄야, 잘했어. 고마워. 내일 기다릴게, 할머니가.
Yeah, I feel things to say about that. I did want to show the petals coming back to life because it was a roller coaster to have grandparents with Alzheimer's, because it's, again, some moments they feel so much like themselves the way that you remember them, and sometimes it feels like they're completely gone, and then you have another day and they seem fine again. And it's so confusing, and it feels like a series of heartbreak over and over again. It's a roller coaster, and it feels like losing them over and over again. And sometimes even when it feels like, oh, it's like the fresh petals, they're still bruised. You still feel it. You still see that it's different. But sometimes you get pieces of them back. And the beating of the chest is something that is so Korean, and is something that I wanted to put in there because I think there's a certain amount of emotion that, as much as I want to intellectualize it and I want to verbalize it, there's some things that are just so physical. You feel it all over your body, and there's no other way to put it other than it's physical pain, the grief that you feel sometimes. Yeah. And it's so culturally resonant. If you watch a K-drama, if there is a death, you will see that. And the turn that my character does at the end is very much in contrast to the apprehensive turn that she does in the very beginning, right? It's eager, it's ready, it's immediate. And it is something that I want to show that I've grown from this experience, and my capacity to show up and to love is so much greater now because of it. And I was like, I'm doing so great. I'm not gonna cry through this. Yeah, I've grown a lot through that experience, and I do feel that I show up better in my experiences now because of it. I show up better for the people I love, and I judge myself a lot for how I showed up back then, but I truly didn't have the capacity that I grew to have now, years later. And I think that's something that I can be very proud of. And the only line that is not a real voicemail is the allo at the end, which is really representative of all the times that I wish that I had picked up the phone and telling her that, that I would pick up the phone now, that I wish that I had, and that I love her.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful.
And even her final line, the I'll be there tomorrow, I'll call you tomorrow. It's a showing up over and over again for love, right? It's and it's not something that you reach and it's over. It's even when you don't reach somebody one time, you show up over and over again.
Yeah. No, that's.
We should all be so lucky to have somebody who keeps showing up, right?
Yeah. No, and she was very lucky to have you when you were there. And yeah.
Thank you for trying to cry with me, Corey.
Well, you made me cry, so I can't help it. No, thank you for sharing and being so open with your story and your process with this whole thing, because it is a beautiful film, and it represents the struggle. Um, but just I think as a caregiver, as a granddaughter, as and everything. So yeah, I much appreciate it. Is much appreciated by me, and I'm sure everybody that has watched the film on our team is just yeah, they have the same sentiments. So
Thank you so
um,
much for creating this space to talk about it, for the interest. Yeah, it's
yeah,
so appreciated.
but I think it's important to you know tell these stories, and we need some more bright stuff in this world. You mentioned in your write-up that there's a responsibility to having community. Like your Hermione was always taking care of people and always there. Um, how important is it for you as a caregiver to be able to ask your community for help when you're in that?
It's so important to have somebody to turn to when you're going through something that tries you the way that caretaking does. It takes so much from you. It's not an endless well. Um, there's so much that I had to learn through this process because I was learning how to take care of somebody else when I didn't know how to take care of myself. Um, and learning how to take care of myself in the years following that meant knowing how to talk to my friends. Um, and it wasn't just a matter of going to them and being like, "Hey, you're gonna be my support system now. Now I tell you everything." It's a process. It's not something that happens all of a sudden. You can't build from 0 to 100 all of a sudden. You have to give them a little bit and trust them with, "Hey, can I tell you a little bit of this? Can I open up to you about that? Can I ask you for this favor?" And you start small and you build. Because if you go from 0 to 100, they can say, "I'm gonna be there." But then once you need it, you don't know what that actually looks like. You don't know how that person shows up. You don't know what you need from them or how the dynamic is. There are people who want to be there and sign up for it, and they turn out cannot actually be there the way that you hope that they would be. Um, so building of community happens very gradually. Um, and it's something that we need to start working on really way before we need it. Um, and everybody's gonna need it sometimes. It's not just about caretaking, but it's just care, right? And we all need care.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Um, and let's see. Did did making the film kind of help you? I know it was years ago, but did it kind of help you process the grief and grief is a roller coaster. I mean, it's there one day and it's not the next and I mean my grandfather passed almost, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I still have moments that I wish I could listen to his voicemails that I deleted on a phone a long time ago. So like it never quite goes away. So um I guess what I was saying is, did this kind of help you process some of that and help you revisit that every now and then?
Yeah. Um, this film absolutely helped me process the grief that I felt. It helped me process a lot of the shame that I felt, which then changed my relationship with the grief that I was feeling. Um, it started first as a film about guilt and shame, and by the end of it, I I realized that it wasn't about guilt and shame; it was about love. Um, so my relationship with this story changed, and showing this film and collecting different inspirations of my grandmother and asking for photos of my grandmother as reference from different people, um, it helped me really focus on how much she was loved and how much we wish that we had done for her, and about how I was one of the only people who was able to, I was one of the few people who were able to actually be there for her in that way. And going back to the fact that this is a privilege that I had, as difficult as it was, and it didn't have to be this way that this experience went down. But the fact that I was able to be there is such luck for me. Um, Feeling like I was able to contribute and to be able to hear stories that none of my cousins know, and to hold her and to watch her when she was sick, you know, to do things for her that she couldn't do herself anymore. So it allowed me to forgive myself in a lot of ways. And it allowed me to feel closer to her when I felt that I had already lost her in terms of, because of the Alzheimer's. I felt that her body was here, but that she wasn't here anymore. And making the film allowed me to feel close to her in that way, in that I still felt her around me and I still felt connected to who I knew her as.
That's that's wonderful. That's great. Um, Last question is there anything else that you want to say to other caregivers, other people going through this, um, friends of people going through this? Uh,
It's so hard to give advice to somebody who's actively going through this now. Um, Other than not really advice, but really just saying that this is something that a lot of people can relate to. There are layers of emotions and they can coexist, and that's fine. And there are a lot of people who are going to relate to it. And start talking to the people around you just a little bit at a time. Let that grow, create room for yourself. Um, Create certain boundaries. And I know that boundaries at a time like this sometimes feel so selfish, but we can't take care of anybody else if we are not okay. It's very much a you gotta put the mask on yourself before you put it on others kind of situation. If you're passing out and you have no oxygen, you're helping nobody. uh, so, yeah, see if you can't take care of yourself just to take care of yourself, see it as an extension of taking care of somebody you love, because you're going to show up better for the relationships that you value if you have something to give and you have something in your will.
Beautiful. Yeah, I don't have anything else. But other than to say thank you, because yeah, this I hope a lot of people can watch that you talk about these things because you have a great outlook, um,
Thanks
and
so
a
much.
beautiful film and other beautiful work. So thank you for sharing with us, for sure.
Thank you, Corey.